In 1986, plans began unfolding for a new church in the small but growing communities of Westchester and Liberty Township. The Christian Evangelizing Fellowship was a church planting organization responsible for several independent Christian churches in the Cincinnati and Dayton areas, and they believed that Westchester and Liberty Township was a prime location to plant a new church that would grow with these new communities to share the unconditional love of Jesus. That same year, a couple named Glenn and Janet Snyder moved from Bridgetown, Ohio to Westchester to raise their two young kids, and they were looking for a church that was close to home. They heard about the plans for this new church, and after a brief conversation with Christian Evangelizing Fellowship, they were not only asked if they would help start the church, but if they'd be willing to host the initial gatherings in their home. They agreed, and then in January of 1987, the church began as a small group Bible study in the Snyder's living room with two other couples.
We moved to Westchester over 30 years ago from the west side of Cincinnati, where our church was only 2 miles from our home. We discovered that Cincinnati Christian Evangelizing Fellowship wanted to start a church in the Westchester area, and we were so excited about that we thought that we might want to be involved in the church. We didn't know at the time that the church would be starting in our living room, but that sure made our commute shorter.
After 6 months of praying, planning, and preparing for the official launch, Lakota Christian Church held its very first worship service on June 7th, 1987 at the Beckett Ridge Country Club. They had 92 people in attendance that day, and God began a good work in Westchester and Liberty Township. After 3 years of mobile church, the leadership knew that in order to grow and have a sustainable impact on the community, they needed to have a permanent location in the community. So in 1990, God opened the door to purchase 16 acres on the corner of La Sorza, Westchester, and Hamilton and Mason Road, with a plan to build in 5 phases. And the vision of the leadership to purchase enough property to allow us to grow has led us to become the church that we are today. Over the years, much has changed. Our locations, our buildings, our ministry, our staff, and even our name. But one thing remains, our mission to reach people who are far from God and lead them into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. With each new phase, we've been able to impact thousands of people with the gospel. But with tens of thousands within 6 miles of our campus who are either unchurched or de-churched, our work remains unfinished. We've completed 4 out of the 5 phases. The plan for Phase 5 was a large worship center attached to the east side of Phase 1, which is the current student center. And so this is our opportunity to step up and finish the work that was started 29 years ago when this property was purchased and prayed over. The reality is, we're out of space, but God is not out of grace. He is not finished here. He is not finished with us. Phase 5 will not only allow us to double our impact in the next 4 years, but it will give us the space to grow to over 3,000. That's 3,000 names, 3,000 stories, 3,000 people forever changed by the gospel. And that's why this church started 32 years ago. With Phase 5 being our largest phase yet, this is the biggest step of faith we've ever taken. And so it's going to take 100% of us engaging at 100%. We want everybody who calls Centerpointe home to go on this journey so that we can not only see God finish His work through us corporately, but so that He can finish His work in us individually. The Unfinished Initiative is a 2-year journey to raise $10 million. That's more than double what our budget is now. So this is a monumental task, but we serve a God who can do immeasurably more. $5 million will go to fund our general operating budget for 2 years so that we can continue to provide outstanding environments for children, students, and adults to experience the unconditional love of Jesus, provide transformational connections for people to grow in grace with one another, and provide resourcing for our local and global mission partners like Pathway to Hope in Hamilton and Project Manana in the Dominican.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Sig. My husband and I first got involved in global missions several years ago when we found out about International Needs Ghana. 5 years ago, we took our first trip with International Needs to Ghana. It was amazing. We got to hear all about the ministry, the many things that they were doing. We got to play with children at schools, visit the child that we particularly sponsor, and we got to meet with the wonderful staff of International Needs and find out all the many things that they do there. I got to go back again this March for a very special project. Our church, Pointe, had given money out of our missions budget to pipe water to 2 villages that had never had clean water before. So it was amazing. Brain, who is the church planter that we sponsor there, is planting churches in these 2 villages, and we got to take living water to them in the form of water that was piped, but also give them the message of Jesus Christ while we were there. I got to go back again in November with a team, and it was a really fascinating, interesting experience to be able to go and meet with 2 tribes of people that are virtually unreached with the gospel. These are least reached people groups. They are less than 2% reached with the gospel. So we were able to go in and talk with them, ask them questions about their people group, where they came from, a little bit about their history, and then we got to ask them questions about their faith and tell them about ours, tell them about the love of Jesus that compelled us to come to them, and then begin the process of what it's gonna look like in those areas to plant churches.
The other half will go towards the Phase 5 project, which includes a 1,200-seat worship center, our large lobby for connection on Sunday, and community space Monday through Saturday with Wi-Fi, coffee, and a kids' play area. It also includes a brand new nursery and preschool worship area, as well as renovated space for elementary kids and a newly renovated student center. This building will allow us to continue to impact our community with the transforming truth of the gospel, because our work is far from finished. Unfinished is a one-fund generosity initiative, meaning that every dollar you give for the next 2 years goes to the mission of continuing our ministry and finishing Phase 5. Unfinished is a commitment to one total number and a call to each of us to radical generosity over the next 2 years. We want everyone to give in a way that only makes sense in the light of God's grace. In Philippians 1:6, the Apostle Paul writes, "And I am certain that God who began the good work within you will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns." So here's my challenge to you. What does it mean for God to finish his work in you? What part of your life have you not yet fully surrendered to God? And will you be willing to do that during this journey so that God can finish the good work he began in you? I'm asking all of us to commit to radical, sacrificial generosity so that God can finish his work at Centerpoint of making disciples who make disciples, and so that he can finish his work in each of us individually as we pour ourselves out for the sake of the gospel.